Activate Your Introvert, the weekly radio show to help you uncover and unlock the entrepreneurial skills in your business. In this week's show, Introvert Myth of the Week. Introverts don't take risks, he says, risking complaint emails. Tip of the week. Rethinking office noise as you think about returning to the office. And a discussion with John Davis, the corporate action hero. John's background as a stuntman, fight director, college professor, artistic director, and comedian led him to being known as the corporate action hero. But it seems that elections across the UK are over for a while, and introvert continues to get talked about in the charts. Okay, I'm just showing off that I'm with it, and I've heard of the rapper Little Sims and her track Introvert. It's also great news that the country is less dangerous in terms of COVID than it was. We're getting ready to be able to hug each other soon, and that more people are returning to the office. I've often spoken about introverts in this regard, and the huge issues of change management that this entails. Today, I'd like to address a specific element that affects many more introverts than extroverts, although it is not a defining point about introversion. That element being noise. If you're bringing your employees back into the office, now might be a good time to consider one of the things that affects many people. Being more specific, the open plan office is noisy, and this can be distracting. My research showed that more introverts struggle in noisy environments than extroverts, and I'd love to hear from you to know whether you agree with that. But there was a much bigger study done in 2001, and it found that introverts are more sensitive to noise. Extroverts and introverts completed a mental arithmetic test in noisy and quiet conditions. They found that noise did not affect the accuracy of the work completed. However, in noisy conditions, extroverts performed faster than in the quiet conditions, and introverts reported greater concentration and fatigue problems. People I've spoken to find the worst to be random noise changing in volume or pitch. It can be tiring and distracting. Crowd noises, especially in echoey rooms, and it reduces the ability to focus and hear properly. There are only 3 things you can do. Arrange more breakpoints where you can get away quietly to recover for a few minutes. Use earplugs. Some of these are actually quite unobtrusive and allow you to hear somebody talking to you, but dull down the background noise. And of course, music, gentle music can help. But as a leader, how can you help introverts? You want everybody on your team to contribute effectively. Could you work towards or implement some of the following? Quiet rooms, where people can sit and work quietly, at least for the periods that they have to concentrate in detail. Music. Could you either play gentle music or allow individuals to listen to their choice of music through earphones? Sound panels. Is it possible to, cheaply, reduce echoes in the office or the meeting room and thus deadening the noise? Even something as simple as soft furniture and curtains can help. Finally, think about what's worked well in the last year. Working from home. For some tasks, you can recommend some people work from home with appropriate productivity measurements. Do let me know what tip you'd like to help you activate the entrepreneurial skills in your business, or what introvert myth you'd like exposed. Drop me an email, give me a call, or add it as a comment to your review on the iTunes store. I would love to hear from you. But now it's time to chat with John. Welcome, John.
Well, hey, I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for having me. It's going to be a fun conversation, I think.
Absolutely. I really look forward to getting into discussions about some of your background and the communication and listening skills that we were talking to earlier before we pressed record, of course. But just before we dive into that, are you an introvert or an extrovert? And perhaps more importantly, what does that mean to you?
The clear answer to that is yes. And the reason it's yes is
I
because
love answers like that. Yes.
yes. And the reason that is because I was an introvert in a very big way and still am an introvert in a very big way. But I would have been able to compartmentalize aspects of myself to go out and be a very big extrovert on stages in front of thousands of people and performing with movie stars and working with stuntmen who are very aggressive and very testosterone laden, shall we say. And so I had to be able to compartmentalize the introverted side of myself to be able to do those things. But I didn't break free from my introversion until I got into acting after high school.
Oh, wow. If we have time, if you think we've got a moment, what was the biggest thing you did to break free from it?
Well, it wasn't even my doing it. It was a good friend of mine who drugged me to a Renaissance festival of all places. And basically, he said, "You're going to go to a Renaissance festival. You're going to wear a costume." So he actually put me in a costume and then dropped me in the middle of a place that had thousands and thousands of people who were going to look at me and take pictures of me all day long. And so suddenly I got, like, from an introverted point of view, and I was extremely introverted at that point, that was terrifying. But the positive reinforcement I got all day. Now you have to understand, I'm a very big guy. I'm a 6'1", about 275, but I was very strong and very muscular. He put me in a Viking costume that had full armor and horned helmet, and I looked like I came out of a Conan movie. And
Wow.
so all day long, people were just taking pictures, and it was amazing. And I got so enthralled with the positive reinforcement I got. My introversion, I think introversion comes from various places, but my introversion came from a very emotionally abusive father. So I didn't have the self-esteem early on. And so I really wanted that love or that respect or that acceptance. By going to that festival, I suddenly got that. And that took me off into a career where I did a comedy sword fighting show called Hack and Slash all over the world.
Good grief. And now, of course, you tour as a keynote speaker, and
That's
you help
what I do
people
now.
to unlock communication and listening skills.
Absolutely. And awakening their inner action hero is what I say.
What's the big secret in that? How can people do that?
Well, as far as from the individual personal side, it literally is understanding where you are and realizing they have to manage their own fear responses. So you have to be able to communicate with yourself very clearly. And the way when you first communicate with yourself is very interesting, because you have to say, if you are quote unquote in fear, you have to realize that you're inside of something and you can't necessarily solve that. But the second you label it as a fear and recognize where you are, then it's out external and then you can work with it. As a leader, if you're leading people, your job is really to understand that you need to be empathetic, because what an introverted person especially wants is to be understood or accepted. And so to be an empathetic leader, you have to meet them where they are and bring them along. Being very aware on a not only a physical communication level, and I say physical meaning how are they standing? Are they breathing with tight air? If they're breathing with tight air, they're in a fear response. And the reason we have this response is because we're conserving air to run further and faster. It's a natural primal response, right? And so if it's not that they can't breathe, it's that their body's holding air in. Once you get them to relax, they exhale. And what happens is it shuts off the fear response and turns on the cognitive thinking response. And once that cognitive thinking response, you're now getting the best out of your employee. You're getting the best that they can offer by giving them a safe and secure place. That safe and secure place is what I would say probably 80% of introverts really need. Is
certainly, when we were talking earlier, you have a program, the 5F program, which deals with this fear response. Listeners can grab hold of a worksheet that they can use.
Yeah, it's an 18-page workbook on how to go through this process. 5 F's of achievement is what I call them. But what they are is it's a process for hacking the fight or flight response. Basically, they're fearlessly focused with faith, follow through with flexibility. And what's interesting is when you go through the process, and you can find all kinds of stuff on my website and stuff later on.
I'll just put a link on the show notes.
Right. So when you go through the process, you actually will find out what your goals are, what are the fears that are limiting you, and it'll help you go through the process of getting actionable steps to get there. And a lot of it does involve communication as well, and how you communicate with yourself and how you communicate with others.
And I think that communicate with yourself thing, I think, is a really big point, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's not just for introverts, that's for extroverts as well. because extroverts will often, because they are so extroverted, they will have blinders to people who aren't as extroverted. They're only seeing the extroverts. A true extrovert can often, if they get too far out of balance, can drop into narcissism, because they're like, look at me, look at me, look at me. And you have to realize, if you're a leader for everybody, not just the people who are talking loud.
Great phrase. Might be a great point to start winding up on. What I normally ask guests at the end, John, is for a tip that introverts can put into practice and a tip that leaders could put into practice.
The first thing I would say for leaders who are dealing with the team, shut up and listen. Mm-hmm. Because the people who are on the ground doing the work anyway are the ones who are closest to the problems and are closest to the solutions. So shut up and listen, be empathetic. And when someone's talking loud, realize the person next to him is not talking, find out what they think too.
I think that's the really big one, because when you said shut up and listen, I thought, absolutely right. It's probably the biggest thing anybody can do. But of course, everyone's heard that. We still just talk. But I think your extra point there was to realize that if somebody's talking, somebody's not. Right.
If you're an introvert, understand that 90% of your introversion is based on some sort of fear. And fear is, when you break it down scientifically, is an emotional reaction to some future event that may or may not happen, with the expectation being a negative outcome. It really is negatively focused on certainty. And so if you're in a space where it's a fear response, then realize that you can say it's not in this moment, because fear is in some future moment, and it's not even a certain future moment. So stay in this space. And then to break out of the introversion, take small incremental steps. You don't have to become an extrovert right away. You don't have to ever become an extrovert. In fact, the reality of it is that you won't. I mean, I'm still not.
And I think that's the point. You're absolutely right. Some of our life experiences and what we develop around us to protect ourselves can lead us towards being much more reserved. But ultimately, if you're an introvert, you're an introvert. What we can do is give you loads of tactics that will help you to change the perception of that and improve your performance. But you're still an introvert, although the world might think you are, and they probably think you are, John.
Well, they absolutely think I am. And I have learned over many, many years that I can compartmentalize my extroversion. So when I go into a speech to talk to thousands of people, I jump into that persona, that acting role.
Love it.
But I tell you, as we said beforehand, COVID's been great for me. I've been loving staying home by myself.
Oh, yeah. John, I'm sure some of the listeners want to get back in touch with you. What's your website address?
Easiest way to get a hold of me, corporateactionhero.com. You'll find all my Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, blah, 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 is all on there. And
fabulous.
And this free gift, if you're going to be on my website anyway, just look around.
Thank you so much for your time. Really enjoyed chatting, John. And we could go on for hours, I think, but there we go.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. It's been really great. Thank you very much.
And now it's time for Introvert Myth of the Week. Those crazy stories that I hear and you hear that some people actually believe. Introverts don't take risks. For the life of me, I can't see where this one comes from, though it's a common myth. Let's blow it up. Yes, they do. What's the issue? Introverts are more likely to take calculated risks than their extroverted peers. They're more likely to step back and look at the pros and cons of a decision before taking action. Susan Cain makes an interesting point that introverts may be less likely to want instant gratification than extroverts, so they take the time to think through things thoroughly rather than jumping right in, because they don't need a result or payoff right now. But risk-taking, not directly connected to introversion.
Thanks for listening to Activate Your Introvert, and I hope you enjoyed this week's show. Please add your review to the iTunes store, it will mean a lot. Enjoy being introversial, and I'll catch up with you next week.